Hey, and welcome back to another video. So in this video, we're going to be talking about deep linking. So you may be wondering, okay, what is deep linking? But essentially, it's what you use in like pretty much all your applications when you tap on a link and it opens up an app installed on your device and goes to a specific screen. So in the iOS world, this could be either a universal link or it could be a custom URL scheme. Now in this video, we're going to be looking at how we can set them up and integrate them within our navigation, as you can see on the screen here, where you tap on a link and it deep links into a specific screen within your app, as well as some handy tools that we can use to make our lives easier, just as essential as McDonald's is in my life. Because I'll be honest, that's an essential, man. You cannot go wrong with McDonald's, man. And then we'll wrap up by looking at what we can unit test, because remember, unit testing is part of your 5 a day. So as usual, all the project files, if you want to like follow along, are actually on GitHub as well. Now, in this project, I'm just going to do a little bit of a quick, overview breakdown. Like I always say, if you can skip to the next chapter if you don't want to like, watch this bit. But what we do have here is a new screen. So it's just a simple screen, a settings view that allows you to choose, if you want to, allow permissions for push notifications, because in order to work with push notifications in iOS, you need to ask someone for permission. You can't just start, spamming their phone and just doing it with whatever you want. So we're going to be using this view to actually, request that authorization. But like I said before, you need to actually request permission for, someone's device before you can start delivering them push notifications. So we're going to need to create some kind of like class to ask for authorization. Now, if we wanted to, we could put all this code in here directly inside the view, but in my opinion, it's a bit dirty, man. So I'm not going to do it. I like to separate things out. So in our settings folder, let's create a new file called notifications manager, where we'll handle, anything to do with authorizations and push notifications. So all we've got here is the class notifications manager observable object, because we want to observe things in this class when we actually start to add things to it. And right now we just have the skeleton of a function called request, because this is what we're going to use to request, access to someone's device to deliver those notifications. So before we do that, I just want to go to the Apple documentation so you can just see how to actually do this and we can see how it works. And if we look at the Apple documentation in the UN user notification center class, there's actually this function called request authorization that has a completion handler. So by you calling this function, you basically give the user the option to choose whether they want to allow or not allow. Now we could use the closure based version, but what Apple have done, because they're G's like that. What they've done is they've actually added a concurrency version as well. So we can actually use the async await language updates instead of the closure based syntax, which is what we're going to do. So rather than us using the closure, we're going to use this one. So let's go back into our project. And the first thing we're going to need to do is actually import that framework, which is the user notifications framework. That's where everything lives for handling with, working with push notifications. So we're going to say import user notifications like so. And then within here, we're just going to do a bit of typing and I'll break it down. So what we're saying here is we're using the user notifications center current to request authorization for these options. Now, these options are basically settings on the user device that they can receive notifications for. If we just quickly click into the options that someone can have, so you can see here that there's a whole bunch of different options in terms of what you can ask for notifications for. Now we're just doing badge, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's the badge you see on your iPhone, sound for the noise, and the alert for any alerts within the app. Now there's all these other options as well that you can actually read in the Apple documentation, and I'd highly recommend you do to know what each one are, so you can see if it fits your use case. But we're just going to stick with using these three. So we're going to ask for permission for these three within our app, and if someone says allow, then they will receive notifications with these options in a nutshell. And if this fails, then what we're going to do is just print out any errors. Now, just like we request, notifications access for someone, we need to know if someone's actually given us that permission, because all this does is just, like I say, just ask for authorization. So in here, let's create a function that actually tells us whether someone has actually given us authorization for their device. So all you actually need as well is a way to actually know if someone has given us authorization for their device. So if we just go back to the documentation, this function does return a Boolean, and that Boolean essentially indicates whether you've been granted access or not. Now the only problem is that we can't keep calling this function every single time, because once someone's requested authorization, it will only fire one time. So we're going to need another function to basically grab that status. So let's create a function for getting the status of someone's device. Right, cool. So what we have here is a constant called status, and we're just getting the notification settings. So this function just tells us the notification setting. So within this class, what we're going to do is create a publish property to see if someone has given us permission. So let's add that into. So by default, we're actually going to say that the has permission is false because, we haven't been given, authorization yet. So with this publish property that we have here, we now need to get the status and actually assign it to this has permission if it's either true or false, whether they're giving us permission. So let's just work on this function here first. The next thing we need to do is actually check the authorization status. So let's say here, switch, and then we're going to say status. The authorization status like so. And then now within here, with this enum, we can actually check the different states. So I'm going to type this out and then we'll break it down. So if we match any of these enum cases, then we're going to say that we do have permission. If not, then we're going to say that we don't. So that's what we're going to be checking for here is authorized provisional and ephemeral. I think I just messed that up. Ephemeral. Right. So now that we're checking for these cases here, the next thing we need to do is actually check to see and return, get a Boolean value from this function here and assign it to our has permission. So now that we've got these two functions ready, the only thing that we want to do is that, but right now by default, whenever we initialize the notifications manager, the has permission property here will always be set to false, which might not be true if someone's given us, authorization. So what we actually want to do instead of just always setting this to false by default is when this is initialized, check to see what the actual status is. So we're going to create an initializer. That's just empty like so. And then within the initializer, we're going to create a task and call our get auth status function. And then the final thing that we need to do on this notifications manager is actually use the main actor annotation. So this will ensure any views that listen to any of these properties, because I'm pretty sure that the request authorizations function runs on a background thread. So this will ensure that any UI that listens to any of these properties are updated on the main thread. Now, if you want to learn more about Swift concurrency, because I've kind of just gone over the user notifications API and not the Swift concurrency stuff, I'd highly recommend you check out my free course on my channel that goes into detail about Swift concurrency and everything that you need to know. Okay, cool. So now we need to go into our settings view and use this class. So let's go into our settings view. And at the top here, we're going to create a state object. And it's just going to use that notification manager class. So now what we want to do is when someone taps on this button, we want to call our request function. So because it's asynchronous, we need to create a task in here. And then we're going to say manager. Well, we're going to say await manager dot request. And when our button appears, we're always going to ensure that we also, as well, just to be triple sure, get the latest authorization status. Now, one thing that we do want to do is that if someone has given us access to their push notifications, then we don't want to allow someone to keep spamming this button and just tapping it like crazy. So we want to actually disable this button. So we're going to use the disabled modifier and just say in here that manager dot has permission. So if we do have permission, so if this is true, it will disable the button so you can't keep tapping it and going crazy, going loose. So to actually see this in action, we're going to need to run this on the simulator, because I'm pretty sure if we go to our preview, you can see that nothing's actually happening. But if we just run this on our simulator now, So now if we just go to our simulator that's running, if you just tap on the settings tab here, you'll now see our button. So if you tap on this, you'll now get the alert asking you whether you want to allow notifications or not. So if you choose don't allow, obviously you're not going to receive it, but we're going to choose allow. And then now our button has been disabled, so I can't just keep tapping this and going crazy. So one final thing I do want to show just before we move on to the next chapter is if I just go to the home screen, something you want to be sure of is that with Apple recently, they actually opened up like a whole different range of how you can receive push notifications in your app. So what you can actually do is in your application, if you go to settings and then tap on it, if you go to notifications here, you'll see that you actually have options in terms of what you can do in terms of how your notifications are displayed, within your iPhone or when you're using your phone. Now I've got everything here turned on, and you can see the settings that I've selected here for sounds, badges, and alerts are all here. So if any of these are turned off, for this tutorial, then you won't see the same thing that I'm seeing unless you want to customize this to your needs. So this is just something to keep in mind. So when you work with push notifications that you actually receive, from a server, it's actually delivered using something called a payload. So a payload is essentially a JSON structure that contains information about like the title, the subtitle, the sounds, the badges, all the information about that your app needs for working with that push notifications gets delivered via a payload. And this is normally structured using JSON. So if you want to learn more about what JSON is, I actually do have a video on my YouTube channel that's part of my iOS take-home test course that you can check out. Dive straight in and just start typing some JSON. And what I want to do is I actually want to go over the Apple documentation to show you what an Apple push notification payload actually looks like. So let's do that now. Let's go to this Apple documentation here called generating a remote notification. You'll see here that you have the alert, sound, badge, and silence. So these are the different types of notifications that can get delivered to your device. But if you actually scroll down, you'll see documentation here about creating a JSON payload like I was saying before. And this contains all the information that your device will use to display a push notification. So it's bare minimum. What you need to include in your JSON payload is the APS, alert, title, and subtitle. So this body, category, and game ID are optional. If you don't include the APS object in your JSON payload, then your push notification isn't going to display the data that you want and work. Now, this game ID that you can see here is actually a custom key that has nothing to do with the Apple push notification service. So if you want to add in your own custom keys to a push notification so you can extract that data out, which is what we're going to be doing in this tutorial, you need to make sure that it's outside of the APS object. Now in this documentation, it's got a whole lot of information that I highly recommend you check out and read. But if you scroll down, you'll see that it's actually a table that tells you what you can include in your notification and what it actually means. So when you're working with push notifications and you want to, configure them, I'd highly recommend you check out this documentation and just read everything that is available to you, everything that's available for you to use so you know you're using the correct thing. Now that we've gone over that, what I want to do is actually show you how you can actually set up and test push notifications on your simulator using RocketSim. So let's just go back to our simulator. Now in my previous video, I used RocketSim for testing out deep links, and now we're going to use it for push notifications. If you're not using RocketSim like I am, there's other APNS tools you can download that allow you to do a similar thing, but we're just going to be focusing on RocketSim. So what we can do to actually test push notifications, if we go to push notifications on this drop down here, you'll see an option saying configure them. So let's configure it. And now what we can do is in the group that I created before called test deep links, we can actually bundle in and create push notifications as well. What you could also do if you wanted to is you could actually select JSON files that you have on your machine and actually link them to RocketSim if that's what you want to do. But I'm just going to create a push notification that's embedded into the tool. So let's tap on add action and then choose push notification. And then for the title, we're just going to give it a name. So for this one, we're just going to call this test promotion. Cool. So by default, you'll see that RocketSim was nice enough, you know, because they got us like that. So RocketSim was nice enough to automatically add in the minimum structure of what it is that we actually need for a push notification to work. And before we actually create this, we can actually hit send to test it out as well. So let's just do that. So you can now see that by tapping send, you should see your push notification appear in the simulator. Now, one thing to note is that if you have your app open like this and you tap send, the notification isn't going to work. And the reason why is because you need to add a bit more code to actually show push notifications whilst your app is open. And we'll get onto that in this video as well. You need to make sure that your app is either in the background or is in a, you know, dead state. Basically, your app isn't open. So if you hit send again, you'll see that it works here. Cool. So what I want to do is actually tweak this notification and actually put in some of my own information so we can just test this out for our own, you know, deep linking in the future. So you can see here that I've added in a title with some text and a subtitle, and as well I've also added in a body. So you don't have to copy exactly the text that I put in here. This is just so I can just make it look much more like a real push notification. So we just hit send now. You'll see now that we have the title, subtitle, and also our body here as well. This looks something more like, you know, you get from a notification from like your favorite shopping or food app or whatever that may be. What we're just going to do here is just hit create. And then now we have our push notification here. So if we just tap on a simulator, we now have our push notifications organized and our deep links, which is really nice. Sweet. So now that I have the code set up for, you know, receiving push notifications, what we want to do now is actually see how we can actually handle a deep link from a push notification. So let's create another one. And this time it's just going to be one for like a 30% discount. And I'm just going to put some text in the body here. So we just got our title, subtitle, and body. So in order to actually go to a screen with a deep link, we need to put that data within this payload. So we're going to be reusing the code that we had from the last video. So if you've not watched that, I highly recommend you go and check out that video, because we're just literally going to be just using that code. We're not going to write any new code here. And we need to also put in the deep link structure that our app is listing for within here. So if you want to put in custom data, like I said before, you actually don't want to put it inside of the APNS object here. It needs to sit outside so you can extract it. So we're going to put a new property in here outside of the APS object. So after this curly brace here, we're going to create a new key called link. And then within link, the value that this is going to hold is the entire deep link custom URL scheme, as well as the query parameters that it expects. What I'm just going to do is I'm just going to go into my deep link, and for my promotion, I'm just going to open this up and just copy the URL from here and then just paste that within here. So go to link and then place that. Cool. So we're just reusing our scheme here with the promo host and the query parameters, where we set a discount of 30% and a description of enjoy this discount. So that's all we're adding in. So now when you look at our structure for our APS, now that you look at our structure for our payload, we have our APS object with the information that will be displayed in the push notification, and our link, which is what we're going to use to extract out the link and handle, you know, going to that screen. So let's just hit send to make sure that this works. And you can see here that it works. So if we hit update, we can now save this within RocketSim. Now, one final thing I just like to do as a good habit is that even though you can send this, is I actually also like to run this through maybe a JSON validator, because at the end of the day, this is still just JSON. So this will help me ensure that what I've got is actually valid. Now, at the time of this video, we actually don't have a modifier for us to actually listen to receiving push notifications in SwiftUI. Now, I've recorded this a couple of months before Dub 23. So if there is a new modifier for us to actually do that, then I'll create a new video with those updates. So Tim, Craig, SwiftUI team, if you're listening and watching this video, put it on the wish list. So what we're going to do is actually use we're actually going to need to use a AppDelegate for actually using some of the delegate functions that allow us to interact and listen to push notifications. And what we have is here is the UI application delegate adapter. So this property wrapper essentially allows us to connect a UI, well, an AppDelegate to our SwiftUI apps. All the functions you will get within an AppDelegate become accessible to us to use in our SwiftUI apps. So we're going to just set this up here, you know, in our project. So let's go into our project, and at the root of our application, so our app file, if we just scroll up, we're going to need to create an app delegate at the top here. So let's do that now. So I have to set up my app delegate, which is, what we're going to be using for listening to notifications. And within your app delegate, when you're working with this, there's actually a function called did finish launching with. So what this delegate function allows you to do is get told when your application has now opened from a dead state. So when I mean a dead state, I mean as in the app was completely killed and you're now opening it up for the first time. So we're going to add this delegate function in now. So within here, if you just type did finish launching, you should see this function here where it returns a Boolean. So we want to implement this delegate function here. Now, right now, what we want to need to do in this function is just return true because we do want it to launch. So we're going to hit return true like so. What I'm just going to do is put a breakpoint here on line 14. And now in our main app entry point, we need to actually link this app delegate to our SwiftUI app. And we can do that by using the property wrapper that I showed you in the documentation. So at the top here, we're just going to type at UI application delegate adapter like so. And that's going to say private var app delegate. And then the type here is going to be the type of our, app delegate that we declared. So here it's going to be my app delegate like so. So just to make sure that this is all working fine, what I like to do is just run this and put a breakpoint on to see if this gets triggered. Because if this gets triggered, it means that it's linked. So let's just run this again on the simulator. And you can see that when we run it this time, our breakpoint hits this line. So that means that it's all linked up. So this is sweet. So let's just stop that. And then let's just go back into our code. So in order to work with push notifications in your app with the app delegate, you need to use the UN user notification center delegate. Now, this is just a protocol that has a whole bunch of functions, which we'll look at in the Apple documentation, that allow you to, know when certain things occur with push notifications when they're delivered to your device. Now, you need to actually set up a delegate for this protocol for it to work. And if you've never, worked with or heard of, what a delegate is, the best way to think about it, just think of it as a link. It's basically a way to allow two objects to communicate with each other. So in our case, what that means is that our app delegate will be communicating with the user notifications, API that Apple's developed, so they can kind of push information to our app delegate that we can then work with. And if you want to learn more about delegates, I do have a video that goes over delegates that I'll put on the screen here. So in our did finish launching, we're actually going to need to set up this delegate. So to do that, we're going to need to, in this file, first of all, import the user notifications, framework. And then here, within our did finish launching, we're going to need to say UN user notification center dot current. And then you should see a property here called delegate is equal to self like so. Cool. So what should happen is we should get a build error because it should say that we're not actually assigning this delegate to the app. We're not actually assigning the user notifications delegate to the app delegate. And essentially what this just means is that we've not added the protocol to this class. That's it. So let's just create an extension on my app delegate of UN user notification center delegate like so. And now you should see that the error goes away because we've now conformed to that protocol. So we just go back to the Apple documentation for the UN user notification center delegate. So if you just go to this protocol here, you'll see as you scroll down, there's there's information about how you need to assign the delegate, which is what we just did. But there's a whole bunch of actions telling you in terms of what it is you can do with this, protocol. So the one that we actually want to work with is receiving a notification. Now there's actually something here called did receive UN notification response. So if we just click on this one here, so this actually tells us when we've received a notification, and it also allows us to tell the app how it should respond in terms of the user's action. And what I mean by that is that on push notifications, you can actually add actions to them where, you know, if you drag down and you have actions to choose to do stuff, you can do that. Now in this video, we're not going to be doing that, but what we do want to do is that when we receive a push notification, we want to perform, you know, the logic to go to a screen. So if we just keep scrolling down, you'll see that there's an option here with a completion handler, but what we want to do is use the alternate, which is the Swift concurrency version, which doesn't require any kind of like closures. So I'm just going to type out did receive, and you'll see that when you type out did receive, there's two options here. There's one where it's async and there's one where it's a completion handler. We want the one that's async. Cool. So what we're going to do now is just actually just test if this fires. So let's do that. So let's put another breakpoint on here. I'm just going to remove this breakpoint because I don't really want it no more. Let's run the app on the simulator. And then we're going to need to put this in the background. And then let's send a push notification. And now when you tap on it, you'll now see that we actually get this delegate function triggered for us. So whenever someone interacts with that push notification, it will let us know that we received it, someone tapped on it, and you can now do something with that action. So in here, what I just want to do is I actually want to show you how to get the data that we set within this JSON. So if I just open this up, I want to show you how we can get this link from here. So in here, what we can do is I can just say PO, and then on the response, I can say dot request dot content dot user info. And if we just print this out, you'll now see that we actually have like almost like a dictionary with all the information that we have in our JSON payload. So you can see the title, subtitle, body, and also the link that we set as well. So now we can actually treat this like a dictionary and just get the data that we want to do some kind of logic. So inside of here, I'm just going to say if let deep link is equal to, I'm just going to copy this code here, user info, like so, and then we're going to access the link value by using the key here, link. So link, and then we need to actually say what type we want to cast this as. So this is a string, so we're going to say as string. And then for now, we're just going to print into the console an emoji with like a tick and the value inside of that, you know, key. So let's just add in here a tick, and then we'll also add in here the message that received deep link, like so. Cool. So let's just take out our breakpoint because we don't need this anymore. Stop it from running, run it again. So if we just go back into our app and then put it in the background, send a deep link, tap on it, you'll now see that in the console, we actually get a message saying that we received a deep link, and we now have our, you know, deep link URL. So all we need to do now is essentially just reuse the function that we have where we pass in the, you know, root, you know, the URL to our root finder, and then it should just handle pushing it to a screen. So this is why I was giving myself a pat on the back in the previous video, because this code is really scalable, flexible, and reusable. Now, the only thing is how do we do that? Because our AppDelegate has no, you know, reference to that handle deep link function. If I go in here and I type handle deep link, it doesn't know what I'm talking about. So how do we, you know, link, you know, how do we link the two? It doesn't know what it is. So we need a way to actually link, you know, some of the functions from our SwiftUI app to our AppDelegate. So in order to do that, what I'm actually going to do in here is create a property to actually assign our app to our AppDelegate so we can access that function. So in here, we're going to say var app, and the type is just going to be this struct type here. So introduction to navigation app, and we're just going to make it optional like so. Cool. So back in our main app entry point here, so what we're going to say here is that on our menu, just above our open URL or even below, it doesn't really matter. We're just going to say on appear, And then within this on appear here, we're going to say AppDelegate.app is equal to self. So now we're assigning this self to the AppDelegate's app property. So I can now access this. So within, if you scroll back up in our did receive, within our function here, what we want to do now is we actually now want to basically reuse the code that we had for our open URL within this bit here for handling a deep link. So because it's a string right now, we need to actually convert this to a URL because our handle deep linking function accepts not a string, the URL here. So after this line, we're just going to say let URL is equal to URL from, and the string here, we're going to say deep link. And then inside of this function here, I'm going to leave the print statement just purely for debugging purposes. But in here, we now need to create a task. And then we're just going to say await, and it's going to be app.handle deep link from URL, like so. Cool. So let's just build this, and you'll see that builds just fine. Sweet. So now let's actually just test this out and see if it works for our promotion. So I'm going to stop this, rerun it, and then we'll put this in the background like so. And then we tap on our push notification, and you'll see that it takes us to our promo screen. So I don't even need to write any, refactor any of my code. I just reuse the function for pushing to a screen. Now, what I do want to do now is to show you how easy and scalable this is now, because what I can do is I can just literally just recreate the other deep links, but as push notifications. So we're going to add one in for opening up an item and also opening up an invalid item as well. So let's go to push notifications. Let's add in an action, and then we'll create a new push notification for opening up an item within our menu. So you can see here that we've just got the same structure with a title, subtitle, and body, but this time for the link, it's actually different, and it's actually the link that is generated when we try to share an item, because we can't use emojis directly in the strings here like this. So we have to do the conversion of it to this code. I actually don't know what this code is, but to this code, essentially. If you want to easily get the, link for a item, if you don't want to have to try and figure it out, the easiest way to get this link is to go to one of the items, hit the share button here. It'll open up the preview. And then, so if you just go to reminders, and then you'll see that it actually generates the link for an item. So you can copy this and put it inside of here. That's the easiest way to do it. So let's close that, and let's just save this. And then let's also create another push notification for an invalid product as well. And you can see here that we've just got some information here, and this time for our link, it's still using the product item, except we're passing in some X's because we know that this isn't a valid ID. So we'll hit create as well. Cool. So let's put our app in the background, and then let's now open up our item. Tap on notification, and it takes us to the burrito. So if I go back, put this into the background, open up an invalid product. So let's open that up, and it takes me to an invalid product. Now, one of the nice things about this as well is that if I actually close the app completely, as in kill it off, and then, try and open up one of these links. So let's just do the item one, for example, tap on it. You'll see that actually pushes me to an item from a dead state as well. So we're now handling notifications and deep linking and deep links for when our app is in the background, and also when our app is in a dead state as well. So it's pretty cool. Is that if we tap on a notification and open up our app, you'll see that we have this tab bar here, and it doesn't really look right at all, because it just doesn't look right. And to be honest with you, what I want to do is that when I push to an item, I actually want to remove this tab bar. I don't want this to be visible. So what we want to do is that on specific screens that you can actually deep link to, we actually want to hide our tab bar, completely. So in our code, we need to tell our root that when you're trying to push to a screen, you have the ability to either show or hide a tab bar also. So let's go back into our project. And if we go into our root file, there's only 3 routes that you can actually deep link to, and that's a promo, menu item, or an invalid product. So on these enum cases, we're actually going to add a new associated value called hide tab bar. So on here, we're going to say hide tab bar, and it's going to be a bool. And I'm going to assign it a default value of false because I don't want to have to pass in true and false every single time, you know, if we have multiple associated values and stuff. So we're going to do this also on our promo data and also on our invalid product as well. So unless we explicitly say that we want to hide the tab bar, by default, they're all actually going to be false. So now what we need to do is we need to just update and fix some of our build errors. So first of all, on our build deep link from, because we've now got 2 associated values, we just want to put an underscore in for the hide tab bar because we're not going to use that associated value. And we just keep scrolling down. And now if we go into our promo, we can do comma, underscore, comma, underscore like so. All right, cool. And then if we scroll the way down, you can see here that we now have, you know, another build error because we're trying to pass in both of these, which, you know, it can't accept. So to fix that again, we'll just do comma, underscore, like so. Cool. In the meantime, sweet. So you can see that we've got these warnings and it's saying that, you know, we've got these 2 associated values. And to be honest with you, this is now where we actually, you know, I put an underscore here just for now, but this is where we want to use our associated values for hiding the tab bar, because this is where we do our view configuration. So what we're going to do in here is I'm actually going to say let hide tab bar, and I'm going to wrap all of this inside of a group. So we're going to say group. I'm going to go put all this code inside of a group. Like so. And now what we're able to do is that on the actual group, we're able to say that I want you to hide the tab bar for all of these views, you know, depending on whether this is true or false. So let's type this out now. So we're going to say toolbar visibility and then hide tab bar. So if the hide tab bar is true, then it's going to be hidden, or else it will be visible for tab bar. Cool. So the nice thing about using a group here is that it will actually apply this modifier onto every single view. So I don't need to keep repeating myself basically. But now what we're doing is that within the configuration, we're now basically building up and saying, based on what we pass through our route, whether we should show or hide the tab bar. Now there's still 2 more that we need to do this for, and that's our promo view and our invalid product. So we're going to say here, let hide tab bar, like so. And then we're just going to literally copy this modifier code here and use that here like so. And then same on our invalid product where we say let hide tab bar. Cool. And then now our view configuration code is fine. Now we still have some build errors that we need to fix, which we'll look into now. So we go into our route finder. So within here, we now want to say, because at this point in this code, you are opening it up from a deep link. So we actually want to set that highest tab bar to true within, you know, any of the routes in here. So for all of our routes that we return, we now want to say hide tab bar true. And then for our invalid product, we also want to say hide tab bar true as well. And then finally for our menu item, we'll do the same as well. Cool. So now if you build this, it should be fine. So let's just run this now. And when you start load up the app and you start pushing between screens, you can still see that our, you know, tab bar is all good and it's all fine. But let's actually just put this in the background. And if I open up a page from, you know, a deep link and push to a screen, you'll now see that our tab bar doesn't exist anymore. And we can just go back to our menu. So yeah, this is all looking good. Right now, if you tap on this whilst the app is open, we actually don't receive push notifications. And the reason why is because when you're working with push notifications whilst your app's in the foreground, you need to actually tell the system to deliver it. So if we just go back to the Apple documentation, in the UN user notification center delegate, there's actually this function here called will present. And this says it asks the delegate to handle how a notification is arrived while the app is running in the foreground. So this is how you tell your app how to present notifications whilst it's open. So if you just click on it, you can see that we have a completion handler version of it, which is fine. But if you just scroll down, you'll also see that we have a async await version of it, where we can actually just return the options that we want for how it's presented. So let's see how we can use this. So let's go back to our project. And in our main app entry point here, within our user notification delegate, we now want to use that will present. So we're going to say will present, and we don't want the completion handler. We want the async await version, like so. I'm just going to clean this up. Cool. So all we need to do here is just literally just say what it is that we want to, return. So I'm just going to type this out and then we'll break it down. So what we're saying here is that whilst our app is open, it should be able to receive a sound, badge, banner within the app, and also list. So list is basically notifications that appear in the lock screen whilst your app is, locked. So let's just run this now. And whilst our app is open, if we now tap on a notification, you'll now see that it gets delivered. And if we tap on it, you can see that it also handles the pushing and hiding the tab bar for this. And if we go back, it's all good. So this is everything that we want. So now we have notifications working in our app. So far, we've just been testing notifications by using RocketSim, locally in a simulator. Now, in the real world, you wouldn't deploy this code. In the real world, what would actually happen is you'd actually have a server set up that would actually deliver a remote push notification to a user's device. So it's all good and well testing this locally, but what you do need to do is actually use some kind of provider to test it on a real. Now, something I do want to say is that you can't test remote notifications on the simulator. You need an actual iPhone to do what I'm about to, show you in the next couple of chapters. Now, for our remote notification provider, I'm going to be using Firebase. So we're going to need to set up Firebase in our Xcode project. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail about how to set up Firebase in an Xcode project, because I actually have a video on my channel that goes, into much detail about this that you can actually check out. We're going to be using the Firebase cloud messaging feature within Firebase. So you need to make sure, if you want to follow along for this part, you want to make sure that you have a Google account so you can actually use the Firebase console. Now, before you even go into Firebase at all, this is the most important thing you need to check, right? Is that you need to make sure that in order to actually work with remote push notifications, you actually do have an Apple developer, license. So you pay for the license for 1 year. Now, again, I have a video that details everything you need in terms of getting a Apple developer license that I'll leave on the screen here. But if you don't have an Apple developer license and your settings that I'm going to show you aren't set up properly, you won't be able to do this next step. So make sure you have that license for either yourself as an individual or a team set up properly. So if we go back to our Xcode project, what you want to do now is go to the project. So the first thing you want to make sure is that your bundle identifier that you're using doesn't match my bundle identifier. So make sure that this is unique to your app so that, you're not conflicting, because you can only have one unique bundle ID per app on the App Store. Now, once you've done that on the general tab, the next thing you need to do is go to sign in capabilities and make sure that the team selected is the option here that has your Apple developer license. So this is mine here. If you don't select that, you're not going to see this capability. So if you click on capability and if you search for push, I can now access push notifications because I have the Apple developer license. So I can add that to my capabilities here. So make sure that you have this set up before you carry on with any provider that you use. Okay, cool. So I've just logged into, console.firebase.google.com, and on here we're just now going to create our Firebase project for our iOS app. So if I just choose add project and then we just give this a project name, so I'm just going to say testing push notifications. You can call this whatever you want, but this should actually be the name of your app or something close to that. Hit continue. Now I'm not working with Google Analytics, so I can just turn this off and then we can create our project. So now that we continue, we should now have a Firebase project available to us. So if we select iOS here, we just have some, guides in terms of getting it set up. So I'm just going to go through this. So just going to put my bundle ID from here into here and then register the app. Now we need to download the Google Service Info plist. So we're going to download that and then show in Finder. And then now we need to just drag this into our project. So I'm just going to close this down and then just put this in our project there. So when we put this in our project, we'll just say copy items if needed, finish. And then that's now in our project. Cool. And then we'll hit next. And then now we need to add the SDK to our project. So we're going to copy this and we're going to use Swift Package Manager for this. So if you go to your project and then go here, package dependencies, hit the plus button. We can enter the package URL here that I just copied and paste that in. Now, I don't know what's going on with Firebase at the moment, but for some reason, trying to get the SDK can take quite a while. So if you realize that when you put this in and you're trying to access it, it's taking a bit of time, be patient. Cool. So now we have that. So we can choose add package. And it will now fetch the iOS SDK. Now for you, that might look like that was 1 minute, right? But I'm not gonna lie, yeah, that takes quite a while. in that time frame, I was able to see the Arsenal scores. I was able to basically see a new t-shirt I wanted to buy, as well as watch some anime clips as well. So get yourself some snacks, get a drink, get yourself comfortable, and just wait for Firebase to finish doing its thing. You might be looking at it as maybe a 1 minute thing, but it's not for me for some reason. But anyway, when you finish doing all that, you'll now see that there's options for what you need. Now, we don't need like analytics and all that stuff, but what we do need is Firebase messaging. So let's click on that. And that's the only one that we want to select on this. And then we want to choose, add package. And then that will now add the Firebase, core SDK and messaging to our project. Okay, cool. So now our package dependencies have been resolved. And then we now need to actually set up the SDK. So if you go back to the documentation, you'll see here, it shows you how to set up Firebase in, your app. So we're just going to copy this. And then we're just going to copy this configure function and just put that here. Cool. Now we don't need to do this stuff because we've already got this AppDelegate stuff, so we don't really need that. But now our app is hooked up to using Firebase. So now if we hit next and then continue the console, you should now see your Firebase console. So the next thing we need to do is, in order to actually receive remote notifications onto a device, you need to actually set up your Firebase project with some key or certificate. And if we just go to our project settings and go to cloud messaging, you'll see that as you scroll down for your app bundle identifier, there's actually two options here of what you can use. Now, you can set up an APNS key or an APNS certificate. Now, in my opinion, I wouldn't do an APNS certificate. And the reason why is because I've been burned by this in the past, because they actually have an expiration date. So you need to make sure that every year you're always uploading and creating a new certificate, which, you can easily forget. So instead, I will create an APNS authentication key, because they don't expire. And once you upload it once, it does send notifications forever. I can see here that, Firebase recommends it as well. Now, in order to create an APNS key, we're going to need to have to log into our Apple developer. I don't mean our as in me and you, but the Apple developer account that you own. So I'm going to go to the Apple developer. Okay, cool. So now that you've done this and you've logged into Apple developer, what you then want to do is, you should see here program resources, and on certificates, identifiers and profiles, there should be an option here for keys. So I'm just going to open this up on a new tab. And then when you go to this tab keys, you should see a, option to create one. So we're going to click create a key. And the one we want is Apple push notification services key. So we're just going to give this a name of APNS key, like so, and then hit continue. And then we're going to register it. Cool. So one thing that you will need to do is you need to make sure that you download the key before you hit done, because once you hit done, there's no way to download this key again. So hit download to get it and then hit done. And then you should see your key here with like the key ID. I don't mind sharing this information because there's nothing you're going to be able to do with this information. So go wild with this key ID. But what you want to do now is in here, you can choose upload. And if you go to upload, you can now actually choose to, select a file. And the file that we want is this key that I just downloaded. So choose browse and then select your key. And then we now need to enter the key ID and our team ID. So if we go back to our page where we created our key and you select on it, you go back onto it and click on it, you'll see the key IDs here. And you can copy that and paste it. And it's also in the name of the file as well. And the team ID, you can get that by going to your Apple developer. And if you just scroll down, you should see your team ID. Now you can see that I've censored this because I don't need you man knowing where I live. And I actually do want to protect my, team ID. So we want to put that in here and then paste it into the team ID here. Obviously it's censored so you can't see it. But once you hit upload, that should all now be sorted. So you should have all your information there and ready to go. So we're almost at the end, but what we need to do now is actually set up our project to actually work with Firebase Cloud Messaging for receiving push notifications on a real device. So if you go back into your project, inside of here where we set up our Firebase app and configure it, we also need to set up the messaging delegate. So let's do that. So first of all, we need to import Firebase messaging to actually access that delegate. And then after configure, we're going to say here messaging.delegate is equal to self. Now this should complain because we've not conformed to the messaging delegate. So below our user notification delegate, and I'm just going to close this off to create a bit more space. We're going to say extension of my app delegate. And it's going to conform to the messaging delegate like so. And then now our build error should go away. So in here, we're also going to need to basically link our app to Firebase. So when you want to send a push notification from a server, the way it works is that each device generates a token, and that token is essentially a unique identifier that is used to basically say this is your phone. So what happens on the back end is the server actually uses that token to send a notification to your device. So in a nutshell, if you don't send your token to the provider that's delivering the push notification, it isn't going to work. So that's what we're going to do now. So in order to do that, there's actually a function called digregister for remote notifications with device token. And what this function does is it literally tells us the device token on your phone once you allow permission for push notifications, and if it ever gets like refreshed or whatever happens with it. So in here, we now want to say messaging.APNS token is equal to device token, like so. Cool. So now if we build this, it should be all good. So this is us basically doing the link that I mentioned before. The next thing we need to do is, although we're telling our, provider that this is the device token, we also need to tell our app to register for remote notifications, because right now it's not actually listening for them. So in here, what we want to do is we actually want to use our application and say register for remote notifications. So before our configure, the first thing we'll say here is application.register for remote notifications, like so. So this will let the system know that it can receive remote push notifications, not just local push notifications. Now, in order to actually test this out, I'm actually going to have to use a real device, so use my actual phone. So I can't record me and do that at the same time. So what I'm just going to do is just disappear Hope you don't miss me too much. I was going to disappear for a couple of minutes and then I'll come back into the phone, man. So let's just test out these notifications. So I just have this running on my phone, and just to show you this is definitely me running it on my phone. If I just go into my camera, you should see me. So it's definitely me running on my phone. So if I go back onto the, the app here now, right now, I've not accepted push notifications. So I'm just going to accept push notifications and choose allow. And now my app is ready to receive pushes. So if we want to actually test push notifications, on our, actual real devices, because you can't do this on a simulator. So what you need to do in Firebase, you need to go to engage, and then in engage, you'll see an option here called messaging. And inside of messaging, what you can do is create your first campaign. Now, like I said, I'm just going to be doing simple pushes. So we're just going to do a Firebase notification message and then hit create. And then within the title, what we're just going to do here is just enter some information. So my push and then testing, for example. Now what we could do is we actually could send a test push notification to our device to basically like see it before we set up everything. And in order to actually do this, we need to first of all create a FCM, well, not create, but get the FCM registration token from our phone. So if you do want to do this, I'll show you how to do this really quickly. We just need to add this function into our messaging, delegate that we have here. So I'll just type this out and we'll break it down. This function is a function that's provided to us by Firebase to give us the token on a real device that a user is running the app on. So what we're just going to do now is just rerun the app after adding in this function. And in the console, we should see our FCM token. Okay, cool. So now that we have that set up, if we wanted to, we can actually send a test notification to our device. So if I just choose the identifier and then choose test, we should now see that that push notification is now sent to your actual phone. So you can actually see that now in real time. So what I want to do is actually carry on and actually, set this up like a real push notification. So in order to do that, we're just going to go into RocketSim. And then we're just going to go to our notifications that we have set up before. And we're just going to take one of them. So let's just take this burrito item one, for example. And we'll just copy some of the information and put that into Firebase. So I'll copy the title. And you can see that even in the console in Firebase, you can actually preview like what this would look like in expanded view or initial state. So we can just send this again and see what happens on our iPhone. So we'll just send this again. And you can see that it looks, like what it is that we have in Firebase. And then for the target, we can choose like segmented options or specific type of people we want to target. But in our case, we just want to select, our app and then hit next. And then we can schedule this in the future, but I want to send this right now, so immediately. And one thing we do want to do is we now want to add in our custom data that allows to push to one of the screens when it's tapped. So in here, this is where we can add in our link. So if we copy our link from here in the key, and then we copy our value, which is this, and then paste it. And we could just keep on going and just keep on adding more custom fields if we wanted to. But in our case, we only want the link. And we can configure all this other stuff as well. Choose an expiry date, and we can hit review. And now we can hit publish. Now it's worth noting that with Firebase, the notification might take a bit of time for it to be delivered, so be patient. But I'm just gonna put this in the background and we'll just wait for this to be delivered to our device. So now if we tap on this notification, you'll see that it acts like before, and we can now deep link into items from remote push notifications suite. So let me bring my pretty face back onto the screen. And now in Firebase, we can actually see information about that push notification here. So you can see that one send was me. Cool. So we covered a lot of things in this video in terms of like working with push notifications, so tools for testing it locally on the simulator. We also looked into how to set up remote notifications as well using Firebase. We also saw how we can reuse some of our code that from our previous video to help us achieve the same goal. So it's scalable, flexible and reusable as well. So there's a lot of things that we covered in this video. So if you enjoyed my teaching style, I actually do have courses on my website that you can check out as well. You can see it on the screen here as well. And also more videos on my channel as usual. Now, if you want to support me, I'd really appreciate it. You can do that by leaving me a donation on YouTube in the thanks. Also as well on Coffee, as well as subscribing and being a member of my YouTube membership, which comes with some pretty cool badges. I say that every single video, but I'm so impressed with how good they look. Now, if you don't want to support me for any monetary value, that's fine. You can support me for free instead. And you can do this by simply just sharing, liking, comment, and subscribing to the channel and hitting the notification bell to get updates for whenever I release a new video. I want to say a big thank you to all my YouTube members. I really appreciate the support that you give me. That's everything from me. I'll catch you in a bit. Deuces.